Tonight, Seoul witnesses the coldest wedding in Mafia history. Kaylin Vey, the man who buried 3 marriages before they began, stands at the altar waiting for his 4th bride. But this woman is different. She's nobody. A bookstore manager pulled from obscurity into a world of blood and power. The moment their eyes meet, something shifts. She doesn't tremble. She doesn't beg. And for the first time in years, the most dangerous man in the city feels fear. This arranged marriage was supposed to be simple. Instead, it becomes an obsession that will burn them both alive. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Rain hammered the stained glass windows like fists demanding entry. Inside the cathedral, 300 people sat in suffocating silence, watching Kaylin Vey stand at the altar like a statue carved from ice and violence. His suit was black. His expression was emptier. The man who controlled half of Seoul's underground empire through fear and ruthless precision looked like he was attending a funeral, not a wedding. He was. Every marriage before this one had died the same way, not through divorce or scandal, but through slow suffocation. The women had all been beautiful, educated, connected to powerful families, and every single one of them had crumbled beneath the weight of being married to a man who demanded everything and gave nothing back except cold control. Kaylin didn't care anymore. This 4th marriage wasn't about love or even desire. It was a transaction, a political move his father had orchestrated before dying 6 months ago, leaving Kaylin to inherit an empire built on blood, loyalty, and secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. The organ music swelled, the double doors at the back of the cathedral opened, and Lyra Vale stepped into the light. Kaylin's breath caught before he could stop it. She wasn't what he expected. No glittering designer gown, no professionally styled hair cascading in perfect waves. She wore a simple white dress that looked like it had been pulled from a vintage shop. Her dark hair twisted into a loose knot at the base of her neck. Her face was pale, her hands steady at her sides. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She wasn't looking at the flowers or the candles or the elaborate setup designed to impress Seoul's elite. She was looking directly at him, and there wasn't fear in her gaze. There was something else. Resignation, maybe. Or defiance wearing exhaustion, like armor. She walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. No family in the pews. Just a woman moving forward because there was nowhere else to go. When she reached the altar, Kaylin extended his hand out of obligation. Lyra took it without hesitation. Her fingers were cold. Her grip was firm. The officiant began speaking in a voice that sounded like it was coming from underwater. Kaylin barely heard the words. He was too focused on the woman standing beside him, radiating a strange calm that didn't match the situation at all. Most people feared him on sight. It was unavoidable. His reputation preceded him everywhere. The ruthless heir who'd taken over the Vey organization at 25 and turned it into something even his father hadn't been able to control. The man who solved problems with precision and violence, who never raised his voice because he didn't need to. But Lyra wasn't trembling. She wasn't even pretending to smile. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," Kaylin said flatly. The officiant blinked, caught off guard by the interruption. He recovered quickly and turned to Lyra. "And do you take this man?" "I do." Her voice was quiet but clear. No hesitation, no emotion, just acceptance. The rings were exchanged, the vows were completed. And when the officiant announced them as husband and wife, Kaylin felt nothing except the faint pressure of Lyra's hand still resting in his. "You may kiss the bride." Kaylin turned to face her fully for the first time. Up close, he could see the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her breathing stayed controlled even though her pulse was visible at her throat. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was brief, perfunctory. Their lips barely touched before Kaylin pulled back and the crowd erupted into polite applause that felt more like obligation than celebration. It was done. Lyra Vale was now Lyra Vey, and neither of them had any illusions about what that meant. The reception was held at the Vey estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city that looked more like a fortress than a home. High walls, security cameras, armed guards stationed at every entrance dressed in suits expensive enough to pass as guests. Lyra sat at the head table beside Kaylin, watching 300 strangers drink expensive champagne and pretend this was a normal wedding. The ballroom was extravagant: crystal chandeliers, marble floors, tables covered in white silk and gold accents, everything designed to project power and wealth. She hated it immediately. "You're not eating." Kaylin's voice cut through her thoughts. She glanced sideways at him. He was watching her with the same unreadable expression he'd worn at the altar. "I'm not hungry," Lyra said. "You need to eat something." "Why?" "Because you look like you're about to pass out, and that would be inconvenient." Lyra almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she picked up her fork and stabbed at the food on her plate without tasting it. Kaylin returned his attention to the room, scanning the crowd with the focus of someone conducting surveillance rather than celebrating. His posture was perfect. His expression was controlled. But Lyra noticed the way his fingers tapped against his thigh in a slow, deliberate rhythm. He was bored. Or angry. Maybe both. "How long do we have to stay?" Lyra asked. "Until it's over." That's not an answer. Kaylin's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time she saw something almost resembling amusement. "You're direct," he said. "Is that a problem?" "Most people are afraid to speak to me that way." "I'm not most people." "No," Kaylin said quietly. "You're not." The conversation died there, swallowed by the noise of the reception. Lyra watched guests approach their table in waves. Business associates offering congratulations that sounded hollow, family members she'd never met pretending to care, rivals wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Kaylin handled each interaction with cold efficiency. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He responded with single sentences that shut down conversation before it could begin. Lyra said nothing. She was invisible beside him, and she preferred it that way. But then a woman approached. She was stunning, tall, elegant, dressed in a red gown that fit like it had been sewn onto her body. Her smile was sharp as she stopped in front of Kaylin, ignoring Lyra completely. "Congratulations," the woman said, her voice dripping with something that wasn't sincerity. "Sarah," Kaylin said flatly. "Fourth time's the charm, right?" Sarah's eyes slid toward Lyra for the first time, and her smile widened. "Though I have to say, this one's different from the others." "That's enough," Kaylin said. "I'm just saying she doesn't exactly scream Vey Dynasty, does she? I mean, what does she even do? Work at a bookstore?" Lyra's fingers tightened around her fork. Sarah laughed. "Oh, she does speak. How charming." Kaylin stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. The entire ballroom went quiet. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward their table. "Leave," Kaylin said, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah's smile faltered. "Kaylin, I was just... now." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Sarah's face flushed with humiliation as she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor in the silence. Kaylin sat back down without looking at Lyra. The conversations around them resumed cautiously, but the tension remained. Lyra exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" Kaylin turned to face her, and for the first time she saw something crack in his expression, something raw beneath the ice. "Because you're my wife now," he said quietly, "and no one disrespects what's mine." The words should have sounded possessive, controlling. Instead, they sounded almost protective. Lyra didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Teague. The reception finally ended near midnight. Guests filtered out in groups, their laughter fading into the night as limousines lined up outside the estate. Lyra stood near the entrance, exhausted and overwhelmed, watching Kaylin shake hands with the last few stragglers. When the final guest left, the mansion fell silent. Kaylin turned to her. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. Lyra followed him through the mansion, her heels echoing against marble floors as they moved deeper into the estate. The hallways were endless, corridors lined with expensive art, closed doors hiding rooms she'd never seen, windows overlooking gardens illuminated by soft lighting. Everything about this place felt cold. Kaylin stopped in front of a set of double doors and pushed them open. "This is your room?" he said. Lyra stepped inside. The bedroom was massive, King-sized bed, sitting area, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything was pristine, untouched, like a hotel room designed for someone passing through. "Where's your room?" Lyra asked. "Across the hall." She turned to face him, confused. "We're not—" "No," Kaylin said flatly. "We're not." Relief and something else Lyra couldn't name flooded through her. Kaylin stepped back into the hallway. "Your things have been moved here. If you need anything, there's a phone on the nightstand. Dial 0 for the household staff." "Kaylin—" He stopped, his hand on the doorframe. Lyra hesitated, then forced herself to speak. "Why did you agree to this?" "To what?" "This marriage. You didn't want this any more than I did." Kaylin was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and distant. "Because my father's dying wish was to secure the family's future," he said. "And I don't break promises to the dead." Before Lyra could respond, he closed the door. She stood alone in the massive bedroom, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Lyra let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd married a stranger, a dangerous man with a reputation built on fear and control. And now she was trapped inside his world with no way out. Lyra didn't sleep that night. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day in her mind. The cathedral, the vows, the reception, Kaylin's cold expression, Sarah's cruel smile. By the time dawn broke, Lyra had made a decision. She wasn't going to disappear into this mansion like some ghost waiting to fade away. She wasn't going to let Kaylin's world swallow her whole without a fight. If she was going to survive this marriage, she needed to understand it first. She needed to understand him. At 7 in the morning, Lyra dressed in simple clothes, jeans, a sweater, nothing extravagant, and left her bedroom. The mansion was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the art on the walls and the expensive furniture that filled every room. She wandered through the hallways, trying to map the layout in her mind. East wing, west wing, the main staircase leading down to the foyer. A library she glimpsed through an open door. A sitting room. A dining hall large enough to seat 50 people. Everything felt empty, despite being full. Lyra eventually found the kitchen, a massive space with industrial appliances and marble countertops. A woman in her 50s stood near the stove, preparing breakfast. She looked up when Lyra entered, surprise flashing across her face. "Mrs. Vey," the woman said quickly. "I didn't expect you up so early." "Please don't call me that," Lyra said. "Just Lyra." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "I'm Elena, head of household staff." "Is there coffee?" Elena gestured toward a pot on the counter. Lyra poured herself a cup and sat at the small table near the window, grateful for something normal to hold on to. Elena watched her carefully. "Can I make you breakfast?" "I'm fine with coffee." "You should eat something." Lyra almost smiled. "You sound like Kaylin." Elena's expression shifted, something knowing and sad passing through her eyes. "Mr. Vey doesn't eat breakfast. He's usually gone by 6. "Gone where?" "Business meetings, the office downtown, sometimes other cities." Elena paused. "He keeps a very demanding schedule." Lyra sipped her coffee, processing that information. "How long have you worked here?" 15 years. "So you've seen all of this before." Elena's hand stilled over the cutting board. "Seen what?" "The marriages. The brides who didn't last." The kitchen went quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Elena set down her knife and turned to face Lyra fully. "You want my advice?" "Yes." "Don't try to change him," Elena said quietly. "And don't let him break you." The words hit harder than Lyra expected. "Is that what happened to the others?" Lyra asked. "The others tried to fix him. They thought love or patience or time would soften him. It didn't. Mr. Vey is who he is. He doesn't apologize for it, and he doesn't compromise." Elena's expression softened slightly. "But you're different." "How?" "You didn't cry at the wedding. You didn't try to make him smile. You just stood there like you'd already accepted what this was." Lyra stared into her coffee. "I did accept it. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Elena said, "even when it doesn't feel like it." Before Lyra could respond, Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Kaylin appeared in the doorway, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his hair still damp from a shower. He stopped when he saw Lyra sitting at the table, surprise flickering across his face before vanishing behind his usual mask. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." Kaylin's eyes shifted to Elena, who immediately busied herself at the stove. He crossed the kitchen and poured himself coffee, his movements efficient and controlled. "I have meetings all day," he said without looking at Lyra. "You'll have the estate to yourself." "Am I allowed to leave?" Kaylin turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "This isn't a prison." "Isn't it?" The question hung in the air between them. Kaylin set his coffee cup down on the counter. "There are security protocols. If you want to go somewhere, you tell the head of security. He'll arrange a driver and protection." "Protection from what?" "From people who would use you to get to me." Lyra's stomach tightened. "I didn't ask for this." "Neither did I," Kaylin said flatly. "But it's what we have now." He grabbed his coffee and walked toward the door, then stopped and glanced back at her. "Elena will show you around the estate. If you need anything, ask." Then he was gone. Lyra sat in the silence, feeling the weight of the mansion pressing down on her like water. Elena cleared her throat gently. "More coffee? Please." Hushed. The days blurred together. Lyra spent the first week exploring the estate, learning its rhythms and routines. She discovered that the mansion had 23 rooms, including a library filled with books in multiple languages, a gym that looked more like a professional training facility, and a wine cellar that could have stocked a restaurant. She also learned that she was never truly alone. Security guards were stationed throughout the property. Cameras monitored every entrance and exit. The household staff moved through the mansion like ghosts, efficient, silent, always watching. Kaylin was rarely there. He left before dawn and returned after midnight, disappearing into his office or his bedroom without a word. When they did cross paths, the conversations were brief and transactional. "Did you eat today?" "Yes." "Good." That was the extent of their marriage. But Lyra noticed things. She noticed that Kaylin never raised his voice, even when something went wrong. She noticed the way the staff tensed whenever he entered a room, not out of fear exactly, but out of respect for someone who demanded perfection without saying a word. She noticed that he never smiled. Not once. By the second week, Lyra was going insane from the isolation. She tried reading. She tried walking the grounds. She even tried talking to the staff, but everyone kept a professional distance, too afraid of overstepping boundaries. One afternoon, Lyra found herself standing in the library, staring at the endless shelves, when Kaylin's voice cut through the silence. "You look lost." She turned. He was standing in the doorway, still dressed in his suit from whatever meeting he'd just come from. It was barely 3 in the afternoon, the earliest she'd seen him home in days. "I didn't know you were here," Lyra said. "Meeting got canceled." Kaylin stepped into the library, his eyes scanning the shelves. "Do you read?" "I used to manage a bookstore." "What do you think?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. "What kind of books?" he asked. "Everything. Fiction, history, poetry. Whatever people needed." Kaylin pulled a book from the shelf. Something old, leather-bound, the title worn away. "And now?" "Now I live in a mansion with a library full of books I'll never read." Kaylin looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. "Why not?" "Because I can't focus," Lyra said honestly. "Because I'm going crazy sitting here doing nothing while you disappear for weeks at a time." "It's been 2 weeks. Feels like longer." Kaylin set the book down on the table between them. "What do you want to do?" Lyra hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. "I want to work." "Work?" "Yes. I want a job. Something to do with my time that isn't wandering around this mansion like a prisoner." Kaylin's expression darkened. "You're not a prisoner." "Then prove it." The silence stretched between them, tense and electric. Finally, Kaylin spoke. "What kind of work?" "I don't know. Something useful. Maybe I could help with your business." "No." The word was final. Absolute. Lyra's frustration boiled over. "Why not?" "Because my business isn't safe," Kaylin said coldly. and I'm not putting you anywhere near it. So I'm supposed to just sit here and do nothing? You're supposed to stay alive. The words hit Lyra like a slap. Kaylin turned and walked toward the door, but Lyra wasn't done. I didn't ask you to protect me, she said. Kaylin stopped. His shoulders tensed. I didn't ask for any of this, Lyra continued, her voice rising. I didn't ask to marry you. I didn't ask to live in this mansion. I didn't ask to give up my entire life for an arrangement I had no say in. But I'm here, and the least you could do is treat me like a person instead of some fragile thing you need to lock away. Kaylin turned slowly. The look in his eyes made Lyra's breath catch. It wasn't anger. It was something darker, something dangerous. You want to know why I keep you away from my world? Kaylin's voice was low, controlled. Because the last woman who got close to it ended up in a hospital with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Because people in my line of work don't play fair. They find weaknesses and exploit them. And right now you're the biggest weakness I have. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. Kaylin stepped closer. So yes, I'm going to keep you locked away. I'm going to keep you safe. Even if you hate me for it. I don't hate you, Lyra said quietly. You should. Why? Because everyone else does. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Kaylin turned and left the library without another word. Lyra stood alone among the books, her hands shaking, her mind racing. For the first time since the wedding, she'd seen past the mask, and what she'd found underneath terrified her, not because Kaylin was dangerous, but because he was human. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind, hearing the exhaustion beneath Kaylin's controlled words, the loneliness, the weight of carrying an empire built on violence and fear. At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and left her bedroom. The mansion was dark except for the faint glow of security lights filtering through the windows. Lyra moved through the hallways quietly, her bare feet silent against the marble floors. She didn't know where she was going until she found herself standing outside Kaylin's office. Light spilled from beneath the door. Lyra hesitated, then knocked softly. Come in. She pushed the door open. Kaylin sat behind an enormous desk covered in documents, his suit jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked exhausted, shadows beneath his eyes, tension in his shoulders. He didn't look surprised to see her. Can't sleep? He asked. No. Kaylin gestured to the chair across from his desk. Lyra sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Kaylin spoke. Why did you agree to this marriage? Lyra looked at him, surprised by the question. Why do you think? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Lyra exhaled slowly. My parents died 3 years ago. Car accident. After that, I had nothing. No family, no money, just a failing bookstore and a mountain of debt I couldn't pay. She paused. Your father's people found me 6 months ago. They made me an offer. Marry you, and all my debts disappear. I'd be taken care of. Safe. And you believed them. I didn't have a choice. Kaylin leaned back in his chair, studying her. You always have a choice. Do I? Yes. Then why did you agree to this? Lyra asked. You didn't need to. You could have refused. Kaylin was quiet for a long time. Because my father asked me to, he said finally, and because I thought... He stopped, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Kaylin met her eyes, and for the first time Lyra saw something break in his expression. I thought maybe this time would be different, he said quietly. I thought maybe I could do this right. And now? Now I don't know what I'm doing. The confession was so raw, so unexpected, that Lyra didn't know how to respond. Kaylin stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights beyond the estate walls. Every woman I've ever been with has left, he said, not because I hurt them, but because I couldn't give them what they needed. I don't know how to be soft. I don't know how to compromise. I only know how to control things, and that's not enough. Lyra stood and crossed the office slowly. She stopped beside him at the window. Maybe you don't need to control everything, she said softly. Kaylin looked at her, and the distance between them felt impossibly small. I don't know how to do that, he admitted. Then maybe we figure it out together. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and dangerous. Kaylin's hand moved slowly, his fingers brushing against hers. Lyra didn't pull away. And in that moment, something shifted. Not love. Not yet. But the beginning of something neither of them could name. Something that felt like possibility. Before either of them could speak, Kaylin's phone buzzed on the desk. He pulled away immediately. The moment shattered. Kaylin grabbed the phone and read the message, his expression darkening instantly. "What is it?" Lyra asked. "A problem." "What kind of problem?" Kaylin looked at her and the cold mask slipped back into place. "The kind that requires me to leave. Now." He grabbed his jacket and moved toward the door, but Lyra caught his arm. "Kaylin, stay inside the estate," he said firmly. "Don't leave. Don't answer the door. Don't trust anyone." Fear spiked through Lyra's chest. "You're scaring me." "Good," Kaylin said. "Fear keeps you alive." Then he was gone. Lyra stood alone in the office, her heart pounding, the warmth of his touch still burning against her fingers. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that everything was about to change. Lyra stood frozen in Kaylin's office long after he disappeared, staring at the door like it might reveal answers she desperately needed. The city lights beyond the window blurred into streaks of gold and white, reflecting off the glass in patterns that made her dizzy. She pressed her palm against the cool surface, trying to ground herself, but her mind kept circling back to the same questions. What kind of problem? Who was threatening them? And why did Kaylin look so afraid? She'd never seen fear in his eyes before. Anger, yes. Control, always. But tonight, for just a split second before the mask slammed back into place, she'd seen something raw and human. Terror. Lyra left the office and moved through the darkened hallways, her bare feet making no sound against the marble. The mansion felt different at night. Not just empty, but hostile. Shadows pooled in corners. The air tasted metallic. Even the expensive art on the walls seemed to watch her with judgment. When she reached her bedroom, Lyra locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, heart hammering against her ribs. Sleep didn't come. She lay there for hours, watching the clock on the nightstand tick forward. 3 in the morning. 4. 5. Kaylin didn't return. By the time dawn broke, Lyra had made a decision. She wasn't going to sit in this mansion waiting for answers that might never come. If Kaylin wouldn't tell her what was happening, she'd find out herself. She dressed quickly, jeans, boots, a dark sweater, and left her bedroom. The hallways were still quiet, the staff not yet awake. Lyra moved through the mansion like a ghost, heading toward the one place she knew might hold answers. Kaylin's office. The door was unlocked. Lyra slipped inside and closed it behind her, her pulse racing. The desk was exactly as he'd left it, documents scattered across the surface, his laptop closed, a half-empty glass of whiskey catching the early morning light. Lyra approached the desk slowly, guilt twisting in her stomach. This was wrong. She knew it was wrong, but the fear gnawing at her chest was stronger than shame. She picked up the first document. Contract negotiations. Legal terminology she didn't understand. She set it aside and reached for another. This one made her blood run cold. It was a photograph. Black and white, grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. The image showed a warehouse district, industrial buildings lined up like soldiers. In the center of the frame, partially obscured by shadows, were 3 figures. One of them was Kaylin. Lyra's hand shook as she examined the photo more closely. The other 2 men were facing him, their postures aggressive. One had his hand inside his jacket, reaching for a weapon maybe. Kaylin stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable even in the blurred image. Beneath the photograph was a single word written in red ink. Severance. "What the hell are you doing?" Lyra spun around. Elena stood in the doorway, her face pale with shock and something that looked like panic. Lyra's voice caught. "I was just... You need to put that down," Elena said urgently. "Right now. I need to know what's happening. You need to stay out of Mr. Vey's business." Elena crossed the office and snatched the photograph from Lyra's hands, shoving it back into the pile of documents. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "He left last night and didn't come back," Lyra said. "He told me not to trust anyone." He looked terrified, Elena. I've never seen him look like that. Elena's expression softened slightly, but the fear remained. Mrs. Vey. Lyra. Lyra, Elena corrected herself. There are things about this family you don't understand, things you shouldn't understand. Then explain them to me. I can't. Why not? Because it's not safe, Elena hissed. For you or for me. The less you know, the better. Lyra's frustration exploded. Everyone keeps saying that. Everyone keeps treating me like I'm made of glass, like I'll shatter if I know the truth. But I'm already living in this nightmare, Elena. I'm already part of it, whether I want to be or not. Elena stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring across her face. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Vey's father didn't die of natural causes. The words hit Lyra like a punch to the chest. What? The official story was a heart attack, Elena continued quietly. But that's not what happened. He was killed, assassinated by a rival organization trying to take over the Vey territory. Lyra felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. And Kaylin took control of the family 6 months ago and has been fighting a war ever since. Elena's voice dropped to barely a whisper. That's why he keeps you locked away. That's why he doesn't sleep. That's why he looks like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Because he is. Elena nodded. And if the people trying to destroy him find out you matter to him, they'll use you to break him. Lyra sank into the chair behind Kaylin's desk, her mind spinning. Everything made sense now. The security, the isolation, the fear in Kaylin's eyes when he told her to stay inside. What was that photograph? Lyra asked. Elena hesitated. A warning. From who? I don't know, but if it's on Mr. Vey's desk, it means the situation is escalating. Before Lyra could respond, the sound of tires on gravel echoed from outside. Elena moved to the window and looked down at the driveway, her face going white. He's back, she said, and he's not alone. Lyra stood and joined Elena at the window. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the front entrance. Doors opened. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with military precision. And in the center of it all was Kaylin, his face a mask of cold fury. Blood stained his white shirt. Not his blood, Lyra realized with sickening clarity. Someone else's. Go to your room, Elena said urgently. Right now. No. Lyra, I'm not hiding anymore. Lyra left the office and moved toward the main staircase, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Elena called after her, but Lyra didn't stop. She reached the foyer just as the front doors opened. Kaylin stepped inside, flanked by 4 men Lyra didn't recognize. His eyes locked onto hers immediately, and the fury in his expression intensified. What are you doing down here? He demanded. I live here, Lyra said, forcing her voice to stay steady. Remember? One of the men beside Kaylin chuckled darkly. Kaylin's head snapped toward him, and the laughter died instantly. Everyone out, Kaylin said quietly. Now. The men dispersed without a word, disappearing into different parts of the mansion like smoke. Within seconds, Lyra and Kaylin were alone in the massive foyer. The silence was suffocating. Kaylin crossed the space between them slowly, and Lyra's instinct screamed at her to step back. She forced herself to stand her ground. I told you to stay in your room, Kaylin said. You told me to stay inside the estate. I did. Don't play games with me right now. I'm not playing games, Lyra shot back. I'm trying to understand what the hell is happening. Kaylin's jaw tightened. It doesn't concern you. Bullshit. The word came out harder than Lyra intended, but she didn't take it back. I'm your wife, Kaylin. Your world is my world now, whether you like it or not. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me. Kaylin's control snapped. He grabbed her arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make his point, and pulled her toward the nearest room. Lyra stumbled after him, her heart racing as he shoved open the door to what looked like a private study and pushed her inside. The door slammed shut behind them. You want to know what's happening? Kaylin's voice was low and dangerous. Fine, I'll tell you. The people who killed my father are making a move. They're trying to take everything I've built and burn it to the ground. And last night, they made it very clear that they know about you. Lyra's breath caught. What? Kaylin pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. A text message. No number, just words. Your wife is beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Below the text was a photograph of Lyra, standing in the mansion library 2 days ago, completely unaware she was being watched. The room spun. How? Lyra's voice cracked. How did they get that? I don't know, Kaylin said through gritted teeth. But I'm going to find out. Lyra looked at the blood on his shirt, and her stomach turned. Did you kill someone tonight? Kaylin didn't answer. Kaylin, what do you want me to say? He snapped. That I'm a good man? That I solve problems with negotiations and handshakes? I'm not. I solve problems the way my father taught me, the way this world requires. By killing people. When necessary, yes. The confession hung between them like poison. Lyra should have been horrified. She should have run. But instead, all she felt was a strange, terrifying understanding. Was it necessary tonight? She asked quietly. Kaylin looked at her for a long moment, something broken flickering in his eyes. They threatened you, so yes, it was necessary. The words should have scared her. Instead, they made her feel something she hadn't expected. Protected. I went into your office, Lyra said suddenly. I saw the photograph. The one marked Severance. Kaylin's expression darkened. You had no right. I have every right. Lyra's voice rose. You dragged me into this marriage, into this life, and now people are threatening to kill me because of it. So yes, Kaylin, I have the right to know what's happening. Kaylin turned away from her, his hands curling into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. Severance is the name of the operation trying to destroy my family. They've been targeting us for months, cutting off supply lines, bribing politicians, turning allies against us. My father thought he could negotiate with them. He was wrong. And the men in that photograph? Dead now. The casualness of the statement made Lyra's skin crawl. All of them? She asked. 2 of them. The third ran. Kaylin turned to face her again, and the exhaustion in his expression made him look years older. But he won't get far. Lyra sank into the nearest chair, her legs too weak to hold her. How do you live like this? I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not me. Kaylin's voice was flat, final. The moment my father died, my choices disappeared. I either protect what's mine or watch it burn. There's no middle ground. Lyra looked up at him, and for the first time she saw past the violence and control to the man underneath. He was terrified. Not of his enemies. Of failing. What do you need from me? Lyra asked quietly. Kaylin blinked, clearly not expecting the question. What? You keep pushing me away. You keep trying to protect me by keeping me in the dark. But that's not working, Kaylin. They already know about me. So tell me, what do you need from me? Kaylin stared at her like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. Finally, he spoke. I need you to trust me. Then give me a reason to. The challenge hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving. Kaylin crossed the room slowly and sat in the chair across from her. Up close, Lyra could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face, the blood on his shirt, the bruise forming along his jaw. My father made a deal before he died, Kaylin said quietly. A marriage arrangement with your family's creditors. He thought bringing you into the Wei dynasty would neutralize a debt situation that could have exposed us to federal investigation. But the people who killed him found out about the arrangement, and now they think you're leverage. Lyra's mind raced. So I'm not just a wife. I'm a target. Yes. And you married me anyway. I didn't know how dangerous it would be, Kaylin admitted. I thought I could control the situation. I was wrong. The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any lie could have. What happens now? Lyra asked. Now I end this. Kaylin's expression hardened. Before they get close enough to hurt you. By killing more people. If that's what it takes? Lyra should have been disgusted, should have demanded a divorce, a way out, anything to escape this nightmare. But instead she heard herself say, Then let me help. Kaylin's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Why? Because you're not trained for this. You're not equipped for this. You'd get yourself killed in 5 minutes. Then train me, Lyra said. Teach me how to survive in your world instead of locking me away like some prisoner. I'm keeping you safe. You're keeping me useless. The words landed like a slap. Kalen stood abruptly, anger flashing across his face. You don't know what you're asking for. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Kalen's voice rose for the first time. You think this is some game? You think learning how to shoot a gun or throw a punch will prepare you for what these people do? They don't fight fair, Lyra. They don't follow rules. They find the thing you love most and they destroy it just to watch you suffer. Then why did you marry me? Lyra shot back. If I'm such a liability, why go through with it? Kalen went silent. The question hung between them like an accusation. Finally, Kalen spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I thought maybe this time would be different. I thought maybe I could keep someone safe for once. The vulnerability in his voice broke something inside Lyra. She stood and crossed the space between them, stopping just inches away. Kalen didn't move, didn't breathe. You can't keep me safe by pushing me away, Lyra said quietly. It doesn't work that way. It's all I know how to do. Then learn something new. Kalen's hand lifted slowly, his fingers brushing against her cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone capable of such violence. I don't know how, he admitted. Start by trusting me back. For a moment, Lyra thought he might actually do it. Might let the walls come down, might let her in. Then his phone buzzed. The moment shattered. Kalen pulled away and checked the message, his expression going cold. What is it? Lyra asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. They found the third man. And? Kalen's jaw tightened. He's dead, but he left something behind before they caught him. What? Kalen showed her the phone. Another photograph. This one was of the Vey estate, taken from outside the walls. High resolution. Professional. And in the corner of the image, circled in red, was Lyra's bedroom window. The message beneath it read, We're closer than you think. Lyra's blood turned to ice. That was taken last night, Kalen said quietly, while I was gone. They were here. Lyra's voice came out hollow. They were here watching me. Yes. The implications crashed over her like a wave. The security, the cameras, the guards. None of it had mattered. They'd gotten through anyway. We're leaving, Kalen said suddenly. What? The estate is compromised. We're leaving. Now. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Kalen was already moving toward the door, his phone pressed to his ear. Pack light. We leave in 20 minutes. Kalen. He turned back, and the fear in his eyes made Lyra's protests die in her throat. They know where you sleep, he said quietly. They know your routines. They know everything. And if we stay here, you're dead. The words were brutal, efficient, true. Lyra nodded and ran toward her bedroom. Toots. 20 minutes later, Lyra stood in the foyer with a single bag slung over her shoulder, watching Kalen coordinate with his security team. Men moved through the mansion with military precision, checking windows, monitoring cameras, weapons visible beneath their jackets. Elena appeared beside Lyra, her face tight with worry. Where are you going? Elena asked. I don't know, Lyra admitted. He won't tell me. Be careful. I don't think careful is an option anymore. Elena squeezed Lyra's hand briefly, then disappeared back into the mansion. Kalen crossed the foyer, his own bag in hand, his expression grim. Car's ready. They moved outside into the cold morning air. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that felt obscene given the circumstances. A black SUV idled in the driveway, its windows tinted so dark Lyra couldn't see inside. Kalen opened the passenger door and gestured for her to get in. Lyra climbed inside, her heart pounding. Kalen slid into the driver's seat and pulled out of the estate without a word. They drove in silence for nearly an hour, leaving the city behind and heading into the mountains. The roads grew narrower, the trees denser, civilization faded into memory. Finally, Lyra spoke. Where are we going? A safe house, Kalen said without taking his eyes off the road. One of my father's properties. No one knows about it except me and two people I trust with my life. How long are we staying? Until I can eliminate the threat. And how long will that take? Kalen's hands tightened on the steering wheel. As long as necessary. Lyra stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past. I can't live like this forever. You won't have to. How can you be sure? Because I'm going to end this. Kalen said quietly. One way or another. The finality in his voice sent chills down Lyra's spine. They drove for another 30 minutes before turning onto a gravel road that looked more like a hiking trail than a driveway. The SUV bounced over ruts and rocks, tree branches scraping against the windows. Finally, they emerged into a clearing. A cabin sat in the center. Small, isolated, surrounded by nothing but forest and sky. Kalen parked and killed the engine. This is it, he said. Lyra stared at the cabin. You're kidding. I don't kid about survival. They got out and approached the front door. Kalen unlocked it and stepped inside, immediately scanning the space with the focus of someone expecting an ambush. The cabin was sparse but functional. One main room with a kitchenette, a sitting area, and a fireplace. A single bedroom visible through an open door. Everything covered in a thin layer of dust. No one's been here in months, Kalen said. We'll be safe. Lyra set her bag down on the worn couch. For how long? A week. Maybe 2. And then? Then I go back and finish what they started. Lyra turned to face him. What does that mean? Kalen's expression was cold, empty. It means I'm going to war. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Before Lyra could respond, Kalen's phone rang. He answered immediately. Talk to me. Lyra watched his face change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. The color drained from his skin. His jaw clenched. When? Kalen's voice was deadly quiet. A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to Lyra, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. What happened? She asked. They hit the estate. What? 15 minutes after we left, they came in through the east gate. 4 men, armed. Lyra's blood ran cold. Elena, she's fine, Kalen said quickly. Everyone's fine. They didn't go inside. Then what did they want? Kalen's expression darkened. They left a message. He showed her his phone one more time, a video. Lyra pressed play with shaking hands. The footage showed the front entrance of the Vey estate. Daylight. Recent. The camera was positioned across the street, hidden in the trees. Then 4 figures appeared, moving with military precision toward the gate. They stopped at the security checkpoint and opened fire. The guards didn't stand a chance. Lyra's hand flew to her mouth as the violence unfolded on the screen. Brutal, efficient, over in seconds. Then one of the attackers turned and faced the camera directly. He smiled, and the video ended. Lyra lowered the phone, her entire body shaking. They wanted you to see that, Kalen said quietly. They wanted you to know what they're capable of. Those guards are dead because of me. Kalen's voice was hollow. Because I didn't move fast enough. Because I underestimated them. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is. Kalen crossed the cabin and stared out the window at the forest beyond, his shoulders rigid with tension. Lyra didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what she'd just seen. Finally, she found her voice. What are you going to do? Kalen turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was something Lyra had never seen before. Not anger, not fear. Pure, cold determination. I'm going to make them regret every single choice they've made, he said quietly, and then I'm going to erase them from existence. The words should have terrified her. Instead, Lyra felt something shift inside her chest. She crossed the cabin slowly and stopped directly in front of Kalen. Then I'm coming with you. No, you don't get to make that decision anymore, Lyra said firmly. This is my life now too, my fight. And I'm not sitting in this cabin while you go get yourself killed. Lyra, I'm done being protected, she said. I'm done being useless. You want to go to war? Fine. But you're not doing it alone. Kalen stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had, but Lyra didn't care anymore. The woman who'd stood at the altar 3 weeks ago, quiet, resigned, invisible, was gone. In her place was someone who'd seen too much to turn back now. Teach me, Lyra said quietly. Teach me how to survive in your world, and then let me fight beside you. Kalen's hand lifted slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about him. If I do this, he said quietly, There's no going back. You understand that? I know. You'll see things you can't unsee, do things you can't undo. I know. And you might die. Lyra met his eyes without flinching. We all might die. At least this way I'll die fighting. For a long moment, Kalen said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. I'll teach you. And in that moment, standing in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with blood on their hands and war on the horizon, something between them changed forever. Not love. Not yet. But something darker. Something dangerous. Something that felt inevitable. Kalen's phone buzzed again. He checked it, and his expression went cold. What now? Lyra asked. Kalen showed her the screen. Another message. Another threat. We know where you are. Below it was a photograph of the cabin, taken from the tree line less than an hour ago. Lyra's blood turned to ice. They followed us, she whispered. Kalen was already moving, grabbing his bag, pulling out a weapon Lyra hadn't known he was carrying. Stay behind me, he ordered. Kalen. The front window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor as a canister rolled into the center of the room, spewing thick smoke. Lyra's scream caught in her throat as Kalen grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the back of the cabin. Move! He shouted. They ran. Behind them, the front door crashed open. Voices shouted, footsteps thundered. Kalen shoved Lyra through the bedroom and toward a window she hadn't noticed before. Out! He ordered. Now! Lyra climbed through, her hand shaking so badly she could barely grip the frame. She dropped to the ground outside just as gunfire erupted inside the cabin. Kalen came through the window seconds later, blood on his temple, fury in his eyes. Run, he said. And they ran. Into the forest. Into the darkness. Into a war neither of them could escape. Lyra's lungs burned as she crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping against her face hard enough to draw blood. Behind her, Kalen moved like a predator, silent, efficient, his hand gripping her wrist so tightly she could feel her pulse hammering against his fingers. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Bark exploded inches from Lyra's head. Don't stop, Kalen hissed. They ran deeper into the forest, the cabin disappearing behind a wall of pine and shadow. Lyra's boots caught on exposed roots, nearly sending her sprawling, but Kalen's grip kept her upright, kept her moving. The voices behind them grew louder, closer. Split up! Fan out! Check the perimeter! Find them! Kalen yanked Lyra sideways, pulling her behind a massive fallen tree. They dropped to the ground, pressing themselves against the rotting wood, their breathing harsh and ragged in the sudden silence. Lyra's entire body shook, her hands, her legs, even her teeth chattered despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Kalen pressed a finger to his lips. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that cut through the panic. Footsteps approached, heavy boots crunching through dead leaves. Anything? A voice called out. Nothing yet. Keep looking. The footsteps moved past their hiding spot, close enough that Lyra could hear the man's breathing, close enough to see his shadow stretch across the forest floor. Kalen's hand moved slowly to the weapon at his hip. The footsteps stopped. Lyra's heart nearly exploded out of her chest. I got something, the man shouted. But he wasn't looking at them. He was facing the opposite direction, toward a cluster of disturbed leaves where they'd initially changed course. Over here! The footsteps receded. Kalen waited 30 seconds, then a full minute. When the forest fell silent except for distant shouts, he finally moved. We need to keep moving, he whispered. They'll circle back. Where are we going? Lyra's voice came out broken, terrified. Away from here. They stood slowly, Kalen scanning the trees with the focus of someone who'd done this before, who'd survived worse. They moved through the forest in near silence, Kalen leading the way with Lyra following close behind. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in violent shades of red and orange that filtered through the canopy like blood. After what felt like hours, they reached a stream. Kalen stopped and knelt at the water's edge, washing the blood from his temple where debris had cut him during the attack. Lyra collapsed against a tree, her entire body trembling with exhaustion and shock. How did they find us? She asked. Kalen's jaw tightened. I don't know. You said only 2 people knew about the cabin. I know what I said. Then one of them told. Kalen stood abruptly, water dripping from his hands. No, I trust them with my life. Well, clearly you shouldn't. The words came out harsher than Lyra intended, but she didn't take them back. Couldn't. The terror still coursing through her veins demanded an outlet, and anger was easier than fear. Kalen turned to face her, his expression dark. You think I don't know that? You think I'm not running through every conversation, every interaction, trying to figure out who the hell sold us out? Then who were they? Lyra pushed herself off the tree, her legs unsteady but her voice gaining strength. The two people who knew? Kalen hesitated. Tell me, Lyra demanded. Marcus, my head of security. And? Another pause, longer this time. And my brother. The confession hit Lyra like a physical blow. You have a brother? Had, Kalen corrected, his voice hollow. He died 2 years ago, car accident, or at least that's what I thought, until… He stopped, shaking his head. Until what? Lyra stepped closer, her heart pounding. Kalen, until what? Until I started finding inconsistencies in the accident report, Kalen said quietly. Things that didn't make sense. Witnesses who disappeared. Evidence that vanished. I've been investigating it for months, trying to figure out if someone in the organization had him killed. Lyra's mind raced. You think your brother's death is connected to all of this? I don't know. Maybe. Everything's connected somehow, but I can't see the pattern yet. What about Marcus? Marcus has been with my family for 15 years. He was my father's right hand before he became mine. If anyone in this world is loyal, it's him. Then how did they find us? Lyra's voice rose with frustration. How, Kalen? Because someone told them where we were. Someone gave them that photograph. Kalen's phone buzzed. They both froze. He pulled it out slowly, and Lyra watched the color drain from his face as he read the message. What is it? She asked. Kalen showed her the screen, a video file. No text, no context, just a play button. Don't, Lyra whispered. It's a trap. Everything's a trap. Kalen pressed play. The video quality was grainy, shot from a security camera somewhere dark and industrial. A warehouse, maybe, concrete floors, metal beams, harsh fluorescent lighting that cast everything in sickly yellow. Then a figure appeared on screen. Marcus, Kalen's head of security, the man he'd trusted with his life. Marcus was kneeling on the ground, his hands bound behind his back, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. His face was swollen, bruised. Someone had beaten him badly. A second figure stepped into frame. Lyra didn't recognize him. Tall, lean, dressed in expensive clothes that seemed wrong in the warehouse setting. His face was partially obscured by shadows, but his voice was clear when he spoke. Hello, Kalen. Kalen's entire body went rigid. The man on screen smiled. I assume you're watching this with your lovely wife. Hello, Lyra. Welcome to the family business. Lyra's blood turned to ice. The man circled Marcus slowly, like a predator toying with prey. You're probably wondering how we keep finding you, how we always seem to be one step ahead. He stopped behind Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder. The answer is simple, really. We've been inside your organization for years. Your father never suspected. Too trusting, too sentimental. But you… The man's voice hardened. You were always the smart one, always asking questions, always digging where you shouldn't. Kalen's hand tightened around the phone so hard Lyra thought it might shatter. So we had to accelerate our timeline, Jibam. Timeline, the man continued. Your father's death wasn't supposed to happen so soon. We needed him alive a little longer. But you were getting too close to the truth, and dead men can't ask questions. Lyra felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Your father didn't die of natural causes, Kalen, and he wasn't killed by rivals. He was killed by family. The word hung in the air like poison. The man stepped into the light, and Lyra's entire world shattered. Because the face staring back at them from the screen wasn't a stranger. It was Kalen's brother, the one who was supposed to be dead. Hello, brother, he said with a smile that looked like it had been carved from ice. Miss me? Kalen made a sound Lyra had never heard before. Something between a growl and a gasp, raw and broken and completely inhuman. No, he whispered. No, that's not… You're dead. You died 2 years ago. I saw the body. I identified… You identified what we wanted you to identify, his brother interrupted. A burned corpse, DNA evidence that was conveniently contaminated, dental records that mysteriously matched. It wasn't difficult to stage, Kaylin. You were so consumed with grief you didn't question anything. The video shifted slightly as his brother moved closer to the camera. Do you want to know why I did it? Why I faked my death and spent 2 years dismantling everything our father built? Silence. Because I was tired of being second, his brother said, his voice dropping to something venomous. Tired of watching you inherit everything while I got nothing. Father's favorite son, the chosen heir, the golden child who could do no wrong. Julian, don't say my name like you have the right to, Julian snarled. You took everything from me, my birthright, my future, my place in this family. So I took it back. I found people willing to help me. People who understood that the Wei dynasty needed new leadership. Kaylin's breathing had gone ragged, his chest heaving like he'd been running for miles. Severance isn't an enemy organization, Julian continued. It's mine. I built it. I recruited every member. I planned every attack, and I've been waiting 2 years for this moment, the moment I finally get to watch you lose everything the way I did. The camera panned to Marcus, still kneeling on the ground. Poor Marcus here tried to warn you, Julian said almost conversationally. Tried to tell you something was wrong, but you didn't listen. You never listen. Julian pulled out a gun. No, Kaylin's voice broke. Say goodbye to your loyal guard dog. The gunshot was deafening even through the phone's speaker. Marcus's body crumpled to the ground. Lyra's hand flew to her mouth, bile rising in her throat. Julian turned back to the camera, the gun still smoking in his hand. You have 48 hours, he said calmly. 48 hours to come to me, alone, unarmed, or I start killing everyone you've ever cared about. And trust me, brother, I know exactly where they all are. The video ended. The forest fell silent except for the sound of the stream and Lyra's ragged breathing. Kaylin stood completely still, staring at the blank screen like it might bring Marcus back to life, like it might undo the last 2 minutes, like it might make any of this make sense. Kaylin! Lyra reached for him. He pulled away violently, the phone slipping from his hand and hitting the ground. He's alive, Kaylin whispered. Julian's alive. He killed our father. He killed Marcus. He's been behind everything, and His voice cracked. I mourned him. I spent 2 years mourning him, and he was alive the entire time. The devastation in his voice made Lyra's chest ache. This isn't your fault, she said. Yes, it is. Kaylin's hands curled into fists. I should have known. I should have seen it. The signs were there, the inconsistencies in the accident report, the way the family business started falling apart right after his death, the attacks that felt too coordinated to be random. It was all Julian, and I was too blind to see it. You couldn't have known. I should have. Kaylin's voice exploded through the trees, raw and broken. He's my brother. How did I not know he was capable of this? Lyra had no answer for that. Kaylin turned away from her, his shoulders shaking with something that might have been rage or grief, or both. He wants me to come to him, Kaylin said finally, his voice hollow. Alone and unarmed. You can't. What choice do I have? He'll kill you, Lyra said desperately. The second you walk in there, he'll kill you. That's what this is, a trap. I know. Then don't go. Kaylin turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made Lyra's breath catch. It was the look of someone who'd already made their decision, someone who'd already accepted death. If I don't go, he'll kill everyone I've ever cared about, Kaylin said quietly. He'll burn the entire organization to the ground. He'll destroy everything my father built. And he'll start with you. I don't care. Well, I do. The words came out like a roar. I care, Lyra. For the first time in years, I actually care what happens to someone, and I'm not letting him take you away from me. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Lyra stared at him, her heart pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to end this, Kaylin said, one way or another. By dying, if that's what it takes. Lyra crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. No, she said firmly. We're not doing this. We're not giving up. We're going to find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. Kaylin's hand came up to cover hers, his touch surprisingly gentle. You don't understand what he's capable of. Julian isn't just my brother. He's smarter than me, more ruthless, more patient. He's been planning this for 2 years while I've been scrambling to keep everything from falling apart. Then we plan better, Lyra said. We figure out what he wants and we use it against him. He wants me dead. No. Lyra's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. He wants you to suffer first. That's why he faked his death. That's why he's been dismantling your empire piece by piece instead of just killing you outright. He wants you to feel what he felt. Kaylin's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we give him what he wants, Lyra said. We make him think he's won, and then we destroy him. For the first time since the video ended, something shifted in Kaylin's expression. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. That's insane, he said. So is everything else we've done in the last 48 hours. A ghost of a smile flickered across Kaylin's face, there and gone in an instant. Then his phone buzzed again. They both looked down at where it had fallen on the ground. Another message. Kaylin picked it up slowly, and Lyra watched his expression darken as he read. What now? She asked, almost afraid to know. Kaylin turned the phone toward her. A single photograph. Elena. Bound to a chair in what looked like the same warehouse where Marcus had died. Her face was bruised, blood streaked down her temple, but her eyes were open, alive. The message beneath read, 47 hours, 53 minutes. Come alone or she dies first. Lyra felt something break inside her chest. He has Elena, she whispered. Kaylin's jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grinding together. Yes. How many more people is he going to take? As many as it takes to break me. Lyra looked up at him, and for the first time she truly understood the weight Kaylin had been carrying, the responsibility, the constant crushing fear that everyone around him would pay for his existence. We need to call someone, Lyra said. The authorities, the FBI, someone who can... No. Kaylin. The moment we involve law enforcement, Julian kills everyone and disappears, Kaylin said flatly. This has to be handled internally. Internally how? Your entire security team is either dead or compromised. Your brother has been inside your organization for years. Who the hell can you trust? Kaylin was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang 3 times before someone answered. It's me, Kaylin said quietly. I need your help. Lyra couldn't hear the response, but she watched Kaylin's expression shift. Relief, maybe, or something close to it. I know, Kaylin said. I know I said I'd never call, but things have changed. A pause. Julian's alive. Even from where she stood, Lyra could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end. Can you meet me? Kaylin asked. I need someone I can trust, and right now that list is very short. Another pause. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Lyra. Who was that? She asked. Someone from my past, Kaylin said. Someone Julian doesn't know about. Can we trust them? I don't know, but we don't have any other options. They walked through the forest for another hour, moving parallel to the road but staying hidden in the trees. By the time full darkness fell, they'd reached a small town, barely more than a gas station, a diner, and a handful of houses scattered along the highway. Kaylin led Lyra to the diner and gestured for her to wait outside while he went in. She watched through the window as he approached the payphone in the corner and made another call. 5 minutes later, he emerged. Someone's picking us up, he said. 20 minutes. They sat on the curb behind the diner, hidden from the road, waiting in tense silence. Lyra's entire body ached. Her face was scratched from branches. Her clothes were torn and dirty. She looked like she'd been through a war. She felt like it too. What happens after this? She asked quietly. Kaylin glanced at her. After what? After we deal with Julian. After this is over. What happens to us? The question hung in the air between them. Kaylin looked away, staring at the dark highway. I don't know if there is an after. Don't say that. It's the truth, Lyra. Julian's been planning this for 2 years. He knows every weakness I have, every move I might make. The odds of us surviving this are... I don't care about the odds, Lyra interrupted. I care about you giving up before we've even fought back. Kaylin turned to look at her, and in the dim light spilling from the diner, she could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "I'm not giving up," he said quietly. "I'm being realistic. Realistic is getting yourself killed." "Maybe." Lyra grabbed his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't sacrifice yourself to save me, that you won't walk into Julian's trap thinking it's noble or necessary or the only way." Kaylin's hand tightened around hers. "I can't promise that." "Yes, you can." "No, I can't." His voice was firm. "Because if it comes down to a choice between your life and mine, I'm choosing you every single time. I don't care if it's stupid. I don't care if it's a trap. I'm choosing you." The words hit Lyra harder than any confession of love could have, because it wasn't love. It was something raw, something that felt like survival. Before she could respond, headlights appeared on the highway. A black sedan pulled into the diner parking lot and stopped near where they sat. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She was in her 40s, dressed in dark clothing, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes scanned the area with the same calculating focus Kaylin always carried. "Kaylin," she said. "Sophia." They stared at each other for a long moment, years of history passing between them in silence. Finally, Sophia's eyes shifted to Lyra. "This is her?" she asked. "Yes." Sophia studied Lyra with an intensity that made her want to shrink back, but Lyra held her ground, meeting the woman's gaze without flinching. "She's tougher than the others," Sophia said finally. "Good. She'll need to be." "Can you help us?" Kaylin asked. Sophia's expression was grim. "That depends. How much trouble are you in?" "Julian's alive." Sophia's composure cracked for just a second, shock flashing across her face before she buried it. "That's not possible." "I have video proof." "Show me." Kaylin pulled out his phone and played the warehouse footage. Sophia watched in silence, her expression growing darker with each passing second. When it ended, she was quiet for a long time. "He's been planning this since before the accident," she said finally. "You knew?" Kaylin's voice went deadly quiet. "No, but I suspected something was wrong. The timing of his death, the way certain business deals started falling apart immediately after. I tried to tell your father, but he wouldn't listen." Sophia nodded. "He was too grief-stricken. And by the time I had enough evidence to present a real case, he was dead too." Lyra watched the exchange, her mind racing. "Who are you?" Sophia turned to face her fully for the first time. "I was your husband's father's attorney, corporate law, estate planning. I've known Kaylin since he was 15 years old. And Julian? I knew him too." Sophia's expression darkened. "Brilliant, ambitious, utterly ruthless. Your father-in-law never saw it, but I did. Julian was always dangerous. We just didn't realize how dangerous until now." Kaylin stepped forward. "Can you help us stop him?" "That depends on what you're planning to do." "Whatever it takes." Sophia studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Get in the car," she said. "We have a lot to discuss and not much time." They climbed into the sedan, Kaylin in the passenger seat, Lyra in the back. Sophia pulled out of the diner parking lot and onto the dark highway, heading away from the city. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked. "Somewhere safe," Sophia said. "Somewhere Julian doesn't know about." "How can you be sure?" "Because I bought the property under a shell corporation 2 years ago specifically for situations like this. Julian's smart, but he's not omniscient." They drove in silence for several miles before Kaylin finally spoke. "I need to know everything you know about Julian's operation," he said. "Every detail, every connection, every weakness." "That's a long list." "We have time." Sophia glanced at him. "Do we?" 47 hours, Kaylin said quietly. "Maybe less." Sophia's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Then we'd better work fast." The safe house was a small ranch-style home on the outskirts of a town Lyra didn't recognize. Sophia pulled into the attached garage and closed the door behind them before anyone got out. Inside, the house was sparse but functional. Sophia led them to a dining room where she'd already set up what looked like a war room. Papers spread across the table, laptops open, files stacked in neat piles. "I've been tracking Julian's movements for the past 6 months," Sophia said, gesturing to the materials. Ever since I started suspecting he wasn't actually dead. Kaylin stared at the information like it might contain the answer to everything. What did you find? He's been building severance slowly, recruiting from other organizations, buying loyalty with money your father's company generated. He's been siphoning funds for years, small amounts that wouldn't trigger audits, but enough to build something substantial. How substantial? At least 50 operatives that I can confirm. Probably more that I haven't identified yet. Lyra felt her stomach drop. 50? Severance isn't just a revenge plot, Sophia continued. It's a full-scale takeover. Julian wants to eliminate Kaylin and absorb the Vey Empire into his own organization. He's been positioning himself as the legitimate heir, spreading rumors that Kaylin's unstable, that the family business has been failing under his leadership. Which it has, Kaylin said bitterly. Because Julian's been sabotaging you from the inside, Sophia shot back. Every deal that fell through, every ally who turned against you, every security breach, that was all him. Kaylin sank into a chair, the weight of the revelation crushing him. Lyra moved to stand beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. We can still stop this, she said quietly. How? Kaylin looked up at her, and the defeat in his eyes was devastating. He has people, resources, years of planning. What do we have? We have the truth, Sophia said, and we have something Julian doesn't expect. What's that? Sophia's expression was grim. We have you willing to do whatever it takes to protect what's yours. Julian thinks you're soft. He thinks the years of trying to be better than your father made you weak. Prove him wrong. Kaylin stood slowly, and Lyra watched something shift in his expression. Not acceptance, not surrender. Something colder. Something that looked like the man she'd married, ruthless, calculating, and completely without mercy. What do you need from me? He asked Sophia. I need you to give me access to everything, every file, every account, every piece of information you have about the family business. If we're going to take Julian down, we need to cut off his resources first. Done. And I need you to trust me when I tell you that the plan I'm about to propose is insane and might get us all killed. Kaylin's expression didn't change. I'm listening. Sophia pulled out a map and spread it across the table. It showed a warehouse district on the north side of the city, the same area from the video. This is where Julian's holding Elena and probably planning to hold the final confrontation, Sophia said, pointing to a specific building. He wants you to come alone and unarmed in... She checked her watch. 46 hours and 17 minutes. So we don't give him what he wants, Lyra said. Exactly, Sophia agreed. We give him something better. We give him a war. Kaylin leaned over the map, studying it with the focus of someone planning an assault. Explain, he said. And as Sophia laid out her plan, Lyra realized with sickening clarity that there was no going back from this. No escape, no safety. Just forward. Into the fire. Into a confrontation that would either save them or destroy everything they'd ever known. The woman who'd stood at the altar 4 weeks ago was gone forever. In her place stood someone willing to fight, someone willing to kill, someone who'd finally accepted that survival meant becoming exactly what this world demanded. A monster dressed in borrowed humanity. And as Kaylin's hand found hers beneath the table, their fingers lacing together with desperate intensity, Lyra knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were going to war, and only one side would survive. 42 hours. That's how long they had to prepare for a war that would either save them or bury them in unmarked graves beside everyone Julian had already killed. Lyra stood in the safe house bathroom, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The woman looking back was barely recognizable. Scratches across her cheekbones, exhaustion carved beneath her eyes, her hair tangled and matted with dried sweat and forest debris. But it was her expression that shocked her most. Cold, focused, empty of everything except determination. She barely recognized herself. A knock on the door pulled her back. 5 minutes, Kaylin's voice came through the wood. Sophia's ready to brief us. Lyra splashed cold water on her face and left the bathroom. The dining room had transformed into a command center. Sophia had spread blueprints across the table. Warehouse layouts, security camera positions, entry and exit points marked in red. Beside them sat weapons Lyra hadn't noticed before. Handguns, tactical knives, body armor that looked military grade. Kalen stood at the table, already dressed in dark tactical clothing that made him look less like a businessman and more like what he actually was, a killer preparing for battle. Sophia glanced up when Lyra entered. "Sit. We don't have much time." Lyra took a seat across from Kalen. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of silent understanding passing between them. "Julian's expecting you in 42 hours, Sophia began, pointing to the warehouse district on the map. "He wants you alone, unarmed, walking into an execution dressed up as a confrontation." "So we give him the opposite," Kalen said. "Exactly. But we have to be smart about this." Sophia pulled out a series of photographs, surveillance images of the warehouse compound. "Julian has at least 20 operatives stationed around the perimeter at all times, more inside. The building itself has 4 entry points, all monitored. If we try a frontal assault, we're dead before we breach the first door." "Then we don't go through the doors," Lyra said quietly. Both Sophia and Kalen turned to look at her. Lyra leaned forward, studying the blueprints. "These warehouses are old, industrial, which means there has to be She traced her finger along the building schematic. "Here, maintenance tunnels, underground access for utilities and drainage." Sophia's eyebrows raised. "How did you—" "I spent 3 years managing a bookstore in a building just like this," Lyra said. "The landlord used the tunnels to access the heating system. If these warehouses were built in the same era, they'll have the same infrastructure." Kalen studied the blueprints with renewed intensity. "Can we confirm that?" "Give me 30 minutes with city records," Sophia said, already opening her laptop. While Sophia worked, Kalen crossed to the weapons laid out on the counter. He picked up a handgun, checked the magazine, then looked at Lyra. "Have you ever fired one of these?" Lyra shook her head. "Then you're learning now." They spent the next 6 hours in a small clearing behind the safe house. Sophia had disappeared into town to access municipal records, while Kalen transformed into someone Lyra had never seen before, patient, methodical, completely focused on keeping her alive. "Stance first," Kalen said, positioning himself behind her. "Feet shoulder-width apart, dominant foot slightly back." Lyra adjusted her position, hyper-aware of Kalen's proximity. His hands guided her arms forward, his breath warm against her ear. Both hands on the grip, firm but not tense. "You're not strangling it, you're controlling it." The gun felt heavier than Lyra expected, colder. "Safety's here." Kalen's finger tapped the mechanism. "Never take it off until you're ready to fire, and never point this at anything you're not willing to destroy." "What if I can't?" Lyra's voice came out smaller than she intended. "What if it comes down to it and I freeze?" Kalen moved around to face her, his expression serious. "Then you die. And probably me with you." The brutal honesty should have scared her. Instead, it sharpened something inside her chest. "Again," she said. They practiced for hours. Lyra's arms ached from holding the weapon steady. Her ears rang from the gunfire, even through the protection Kalen had given her. But with each shot, her aim improved. Her breathing steadied. The fear that had gripped her chest loosened its hold. By the time the sun started setting, Lyra could hit a target at 20 yards. Not perfectly. Not like Kalen, who moved like violence was a language he'd spoken since birth. But well enough to survive. Maybe. Sophia returned as darkness fell, her expression grim but determined. "I found them," she said, spreading new documents across the dining table. "Maintenance tunnels running beneath the entire warehouse district. Most are sealed off, but 3 still have active access points." She pointed to locations on the map. "This one exits 2 buildings away from Julian's location. If we can get inside without triggering the perimeter alarms, we have a chance." "What about Elena?" Lyra asked. "Where's he keeping her?" Sophia pulled up security footage on her laptop, grainy images from traffic cameras near the warehouse. "I've been monitoring movement patterns. There's a section of the building with no exterior windows, heavily guarded. If I had to guess, that's where he's holding prisoners." Kalen studied the layout with the intensity of someone memorizing every detail. "How many guards?" "At least 6 on that section alone. More throughout the building. So we're looking at 40+ hostiles minimum. Probably closer to 50. The numbers were impossible. Suicide. But Kalen's expression didn't change. "Then we'll need an advantage they won't expect," he said quietly. "Like what?" Sophia asked. Kalen looked at Lyra, and something shifted in his eyes. like making them think I'm coming alone. Understanding crashed over Lyra like ice water. No, absolutely not. It's the only way. You'll get yourself killed. Not if we do this right. Kaylin turned to Sophia. How long would it take to rig a distraction? Something big enough to pull half of Julian's forces away from the main building? Sophia's expression darkened with understanding. You want to split their attention. Exactly. I walk in the front door at the appointed time. Julian gets what he wants. Me, alone, apparently defeated. Meanwhile, you and Lyra use the tunnels to get Elena out and eliminate as many of his operatives as possible from the inside. That's insane, Lyra said. He'll kill you the second you walk through that door. Maybe, but he'll want to gloat first. Julian doesn't just want me dead, he wants me broken. That buys you time. How much time? Enough. The word hung in the air like a lie they were all pretending to believe. Sophia closed her laptop slowly. If we're doing this, we need to move tonight. Get into position while we still have darkness on our side. Kaylin nodded. How long to set up the distraction? 4 hours, maybe 5. Do it. Sophia left immediately, disappearing into the night with a duffel bag full of equipment Lyra didn't want to think about too closely, which left Lyra and Kaylin alone in the safe house, with nothing but silence and the weight of what was coming. Kaylin moved to the window, staring out at the darkness beyond. Lyra approached slowly, stopping beside him. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I do. Why? Because of some misplaced sense of honor? Because you think you deserve to die for your father's sins? Because if I don't, Julian will keep killing until there's nothing left. Kaylin turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his expression was devastating. This is the only way to end it, the only way to protect you. I don't need protection, Lyra said. I need you alive. The words came out rawer than she intended, but she didn't take them back. Kaylin's hand lifted slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone capable of such violence. When this is over, he started. Don't, Lyra interrupted. Don't say goodbye like you've already decided to die. I'm trying to be realistic. Fuck realistic. The curse felt foreign on her tongue, but necessary. I didn't survive the last 48 hours just to watch you throw your life away because you think it's noble. We're doing this together or not at all. Kaylin stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and fierce, and tasted like fear and determination and everything they hadn't had time to say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kaylin pressed his forehead against hers. If something goes wrong, he started. Nothing's going wrong. Lyra, I mean it, Kaylin. We're both walking out of that warehouse, together. Do you understand me? A ghost of a smile flickered across his face. You're terrifying when you're determined. Good. Maybe I learned it from you. 36 hours remaining. They moved through the city like ghosts, traveling in a nondescript van Sophia had acquired from sources Lyra didn't ask about. The warehouse district loomed ahead, industrial buildings lined up like tombstones against the night sky. Sophia parked 3 blocks away from their target. The tunnel entrance is through that condemned building, she said, pointing to a structure that looked moments away from collapse. City sealed it 5 years ago, but the lock's been broken for months. Homeless population uses it for shelter sometimes. So it's not actually sealed, Kaylin said. Nothing in this city stays sealed long. They grabbed their equipment, tactical gear, weapons, communication devices that felt too small to be reliable, and approached the building on foot. The entrance was exactly as Sophia described. Broken lock, graffiti covering the walls, the smell of decay and neglect thick in the air. Inside, Sophia led them through corridors filled with debris and shadows until they reached a maintenance door half hidden behind a collapsed section of drywall. The door opened onto stairs descending into darkness. From here, it's 2 miles through the tunnels to reach Julian's building, Sophia said, clicking on a flashlight. Stay quiet, stay together, and whatever you do, don't trigger any of the sensors I'm about to show you how to avoid. They descended into the tunnels. The air was thick and damp, pressing against Lyra's lungs like water. The only light came from their flashlights, carving narrow paths through absolute darkness. Every sound echoed, footsteps, breathing, the distant drip of water that might have been condensation or something worse. Lyra's hand gripped the gun Kaylin had given her, her finger resting carefully above the trigger guard like he'd taught her. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. Sophia navigated with confidence born from preparation, stopping occasionally to disable sensors or mark their path. Finally, she held up a hand. Everyone froze. "That's it," Sophia whispered, pointing ahead. A ladder led upward to a maintenance hatch barely visible in the darkness. "This opens into a storage room in the southwest corner of Julian's building," Sophia continued. "Once we're through, we'll have approximately 30 seconds before the guard rotation brings someone past our position." "What about cameras?" Kaylin asked. "I'll handle those." Sophia pulled out a small device Lyra didn't recognize. "This jammer will give us a 5-minute window. After that, they'll know something's wrong." 5 minutes isn't much time. "It's enough to get Elena and get out." Kaylin checked his watch. "The distraction goes live in 90 minutes. We need to be in position before then." Sophia nodded and started climbing. Lyra followed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Above her, Sophia carefully opened the hatch, peering into the room beyond. "Clear," she whispered. They climbed through one by one, emerging into a storage room filled with industrial shelving and equipment. The air was different here, warmer, with the faint smell of oil and metal. Sophia immediately activated the jammer and moved to the door, pressing her ear against it. Silence. Then footsteps. They all froze, barely breathing, as someone walked past outside. The footsteps faded. Sophia cracked the door and peered into the hallway. 2 guards at the end of the corridor, armed. We need to take them out quietly. Kaylin moved forward without hesitation, pulling a knife from his belt. What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but Lyra would remember it for the rest of her life. Kaylin moved like death itself. Silent, efficient, absolutely without mercy. The first guard never saw him coming. The second barely had time to register surprise before Kaylin's hand clamped over his mouth and the knife found its mark. Both bodies dropped. Kaylin dragged them into a nearby room and returned to the group, his expression completely blank. Like he'd just completed a routine task. Like ending human lives was something he'd done so many times, it didn't even register anymore. Lyra's stomach turned, but she forced herself to swallow the nausea. This was the world she'd chosen. This was survival. They moved deeper into the building, following Sophia's memorized layout. The corridors were narrow and industrial, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that cast everything in sickly yellow. Every corner could hide an enemy. Every door could open onto death. Lyra's fingers stayed above the trigger guard, her breathing controlled despite the terror threatening to consume her. They encountered 3 more guards. Kaylin eliminated 2. Sophia took out the third with a suppressed pistol that made a sound like a whispered cough. By the time they reached the section where Elena was supposedly being held, Lyra had stopped feeling shocked by the violence. She'd stopped feeling much of anything except cold determination. Sophia stopped in front of a heavy metal door with a keypad lock. "This is it," she whispered. Kaylin checked his watch. "We have 2 minutes before the distraction. Get ready." Sophia pulled out another device and connected it to the keypad. Numbers flickered across a small screen as it cycled through combinations. 30 seconds passed. 45. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was exactly what the video had shown, a room stripped bare except for a single chair in the center. Elena sat bound to it, her face bruised and swollen, blood dried across her temple. But she was alive. Her eyes widened when she saw them, tears streaming down her face. Kaylin crossed the room in 3 strides and cut through the ropes binding her. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded, her entire body shaking. Sophia moved to support her, but before anyone could speak, alarms exploded throughout the building. Deafening, disorienting, absolutely catastrophic. "That's not the distraction," Sophia shouted over the noise. "No," Kaylin agreed grimly. "That's us being discovered." Gunfire erupted from somewhere close. Too close. "Move," Kaylin ordered. They ran. Elena stumbled between Sophia and Lyra, barely able to support her own weight. Behind them, voices shouted orders. Boots hammered against concrete. Kaylin led them through the maze of corridors, his weapon raised, his movements sure despite the chaos. They turned a corner and came face to face with 4 guards. Time slowed. Kaylin fired first, 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 guards dropped immediately. The third raised his weapon. Lyra didn't think. Her training took over. She raised her gun and fired. The recoil jolted through her arms. The sound was deafening even through her ringing ears. The guard fell. She'd killed him. She'd actually killed someone. The realization crashed over her, but there was no time to process it. No time to feel horror or guilt or anything except the desperate need to survive. The fourth guard aimed at Kaylin. Sophia took him out before he could fire. "Keep moving," Kaylin shouted. They ran toward the maintenance hatch, but more guards poured into the corridors ahead of them. They were cut off, trapped between enemies closing in from both sides. Kaylin's jaw tightened as he assessed the situation. "Sophia, get Elena and Lyra out through the east exit. I'll draw them away." "No," Lyra said immediately. "We're not splitting up. We don't have a choice." An explosion rocked the building. The distraction, right on schedule. The guards hesitated, confused, as alarms shifted to emergency evacuation protocols. "Now!" Kaylin shouted. They ran toward the east exit as half the guards peeled away toward the explosion. The remaining forces tried to pursue, but the chaos worked in their favor. They reached the exit, a heavy door leading to the loading dock. Kaylin kicked it open. Outside, the night air hit like salvation. They emerged into chaos, smoke billowing from the far side of the compound. Security forces running in every direction, vehicles racing toward the explosion. "The van's 2 blocks north," Sophia gasped. They ran through the industrial maze, Elena supported between Lyra and Sophia, Kaylin covering their retreat with his weapon raised. They'd almost made it to the street when a voice cut through the chaos. "Leaving so soon, brother?" Everyone froze. Julian stepped out from behind a shipping container, flanked by 6 armed men. He looked exactly like Kaylin. Same height, same build, same sharp features. But where Kaylin's eyes held exhaustion and determination, Julian's held nothing but cold amusement. "I have to admit," Julian said conversationally, "I'm impressed. Breaking in through the tunnels, creating a distraction, rescuing poor Elena. Very dramatic." "Let us go," Kaylin said quietly, his weapon aimed directly at Julian's chest. "You know I can't do that." "Then one of us dies right here," Julian smiled. That was always how this was going to end. The 6 guards raised their weapons. Kaylin, Sophia, and Lyra did the same. Mexican standoff. One move and everyone dies. Julian's smile widened. "You're wondering if I'm bluffing, if I'd really risk my own life just to kill you. The answer is yes, Kaylin, because unlike you, I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of living in your shadow for another second." "Then let's end this," Kaylin said, his voice deadly calm. "You and me. No one else. Winner takes everything." "How noble." Julian's expression hardened. "But I don't fight fair." He raised his hand. 30 more guards emerged from the shadows, surrounding them completely. Lyra's heart sank. They were outnumbered at least 6-1. Even with Kaylin's training and Sophia's tactical knowledge, they couldn't win this fight. Julian knew it too. "Last chance," he said. "Put down your weapons and I'll make this quick. Resist, and everyone dies slowly." Lyra looked at Kaylin, watching the calculations running behind his eyes. Then Kaylin did something she didn't expect. He smiled. Not a happy smile. A dangerous one. "You made one mistake, Julian," Kaylin said quietly. "What's that?" "You assumed I came here to fight." Julian's expression shifted, confusion flickering across his face for the first time. "I came here to burn your entire operation to the ground," Kaylin continued. "And the distraction you heard? That wasn't explosives." Understanding crashed across Julian's face. "That was every corrupt official you've been bribing, receiving copies of your financial records. Every politician you own getting evidence of your crimes. Every rival organization learning exactly where you've been hiding for 2 years. Julian's composure cracked. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your phone." Julian's hand moved to his pocket, his eyes never leaving Kaylin. He pulled out his phone. The color drained from his face. 47 text messages, Kaylin said quietly, all sent 10 minutes ago, all containing enough evidence to put you away for life. Your allies are turning on you right now. Your resources are being seized. Your safe houses are being raided. "You son of a—" "You wanted to destroy everything I built," Kaylin interrupted. "So I destroyed everything you built first." Julian's mask of control shattered completely. Kill them! Kill them all! The guards raised their weapons. Lyra closed her eyes, certain these were her last seconds alive. Then sirens exploded from every direction. Red and blue lights flooded the compound. Dozens of police vehicles surrounded the area, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. Everyone on the ground! Now! Julian's guards hesitated, trapped between their boss's orders and overwhelming force. Sophia grabbed Lyra and Elena, pulling them behind cover as chaos erupted. Some guards dropped their weapons immediately. Others opened fire. The shootout lasted less than a minute, but it felt like eternity. When the gunfire finally stopped, Julian was on his knees with his hands cuffed behind his back, surrounded by federal agents. Kalen stood over him, his weapon lowered, his expression completely empty. "You destroyed me," Julian whispered, his voice broken. "Everything I built, everything I planned." "You did that to yourself," Kalen said quietly, "the moment you killed our father." Julian looked up at him, and for the first time Lyra saw genuine emotion in his eyes. Hatred so pure it was almost beautiful in its intensity. "This isn't over," Julian said. "Yes," Kalen said. "It is." Federal agents pulled Julian to his feet and dragged him toward a waiting vehicle. As they did, he looked back one more time, not at Kalen, at Lyra, and smiled. The kind of smile that promised this wasn't finished, that promised revenge, that promised something far worse was coming. Then he was gone, shoved into the vehicle that would take him away forever. Lyra stood in the chaos, her entire body shaking, the gun still gripped in her hand. She'd killed someone tonight. She'd fired a weapon at a human being and watched them fall. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Kalen approached slowly, gently taking the gun from her trembling hands. "It's over," he said quietly. But Lyra looked at the spot where Julian had disappeared, and she knew with absolute certainty that Kalen was wrong. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Because the look Julian had given her before they took him away wasn't defeat, it was promise. And somewhere in the back of Lyra's mind, a voice whispered that they'd won the battle, but the war was far from finished. The federal building was cold, sterile. Everything about it felt designed to strip away humanity and leave only facts, evidence, and the brutal machinery of justice. Lyra sat in a gray interrogation room, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Across from her, a federal agent whose name she'd already forgotten asked questions she barely registered. "And you're certain you fired in self-defense?" "Yes." "The deceased was armed and actively threatening your life?" "Yes." "Mrs. Vey, I need you to understand the severity of—" "She understands," Kalen's voice cut through from the doorway. "And unless you're charging her with something, this interview is over." The agent's expression soured, but he stood. "We'll be in touch if we have further questions." When he left, Kalen closed the door and crossed to where Lyra sat. He looked as exhausted as she felt, shadows carved beneath his eyes, tension radiating from every line of his body despite the suit he'd changed into. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. Lyra stared at her untouched coffee. "I killed someone. To save my life. Does that make it better?" Kalen sank into the chair across from her, and for a long moment he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with something that might have been guilt or understanding or both. "No," he admitted. "It doesn't make it better. It just makes it necessary." Lyra looked up at him, and the weight of everything they'd been through crashed over her like a wave. The wedding that felt like a lifetime ago, the isolation, the fear, the violence, the moment she'd pulled a trigger and watched a human being fall. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "You're someone who survived." "At what cost?" Kalen's hand reached across the table, covering hers. "At whatever cost was required. And I'm sorry you had to pay it." The apology broke something inside Lyra's chest. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his, and for the first time since the warehouse, she let herself feel the full magnitude of what they'd endured. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we testify. The federal prosecutor wants statements from everyone involved. Sophia's already given hers. Elena's being questioned in another room." "And Julian?" Kalen's expression darkened. "In custody. They're charging him with murder, conspiracy, racketeering, and about 40 other counts. He'll never see freedom again." The words should have brought relief. Instead, Lyra remembered the look Julian had given her before they took him away. That smile that promised this wasn't over. "You don't believe that," she said quietly. Kaylin's jaw tightened. "What makes you say that?" "Because I saw your face when they took him. You looked like someone preparing for the next attack, not celebrating victory." For a moment, Kaylin looked like he might deny it. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and he exhaled. "Julian's smart, connected. Even from prison, he has resources. And he spent 2 years proving he's willing to burn everything down just to watch me suffer." Kaylin's fingers tightened around hers. "So no, I don't believe it's over. I believe we bought ourselves time, maybe years. But men like Julian don't give up. They adapt." The honesty was brutal, but Lyra appreciated it more than any comfortable lie. "Then we adapt too," she said. Kaylin looked at her like she'd said something profound. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd run the first chance they got. Someone who'd hate me for dragging them into this nightmare." Lyra thought about that. About the woman who'd stood at the altar 5 weeks ago, resigned to a loveless marriage, invisible and afraid. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone who'd survived violence and chaos and discovered she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. "I don't hate you," Lyra said quietly. "I should, but I don't." "Why not?" "Because you kept me alive, and because somewhere in the middle of all this hell, I stopped feeling invisible." The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Before Kaylin could respond, the door opened. Sophia stepped inside, her expression grim. "We have a problem," she said. "Dasag." The problem, it turned out, was that Julian had managed to post bail. "That's impossible," Kaylin said, his voice deadly quiet. "The charges alone should have kept him locked up." Sophia spread documents across the conference table they'd been moved to. "He has connections we didn't account for. A federal judge with ties to one of his shell corporations signed off on a $10 million bond 2 hours ago. Where is he now? Unknown. He posted bail and disappeared. No ankle monitor, no travel restrictions. The judge made sure of that." Lyra watched Kaylin's expression shift from shock to cold fury. "How is that legal?" "It's not," Sophia said, "but by the time the prosecution challenges it, Julian will be long gone. He's probably out of the country already." Kaylin stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Then we find him." "With what resources?" Sophia's voice was sharp with frustration. "Half your organization is being investigated. Your assets are frozen. Julian made sure of that before he got arrested, left a trail of evidence implicating you in his crimes." "That's bullshit. Of course it's bullshit, but proving it will take months, maybe years. And by then, Julian will have rebuilt everything we destroyed." The room fell silent. Lyra watched Kaylin process the information, saw the calculations running behind his eyes, the same focus he'd had in the warehouse, the same cold determination that had kept them alive. "There's another way," Kaylin said quietly. Sophia's expression shifted. "Don't. I'm not letting him disappear, not after everything he's done. If you go after him now, you'll be playing his game. That's exactly what he wants, for you to become the villain in his story." "I'm already the villain," Kaylin said flatly. "The only question is whether I'm a villain who protects what's mine or one who lets his enemies walk free." "Kaylin, where would he go?" Kaylin turned to face Sophia fully. "If you were Julian, where would you run?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her laptop and opened a file. "He has properties in 6 countries. Safe houses, shell corporations, money hidden in offshore accounts. But if I had to guess..." She pulled up a map. "Here, a compound outside of Taipei. Remote, defensible, and far enough from U.S. jurisdiction that extradition would be nearly impossible." Kaylin studied the location with the focus of someone planning an assault. "How long would it take him to get there?" 12 hours, maybe less if he has a private jet waiting." Kaylin checked his watch. "Then we have maybe 6 hours before he's untouchable." "You're not seriously considering this," Sophia said. "Even if you found him, what are you going to do? Kill him? That makes you exactly what he's been trying to prove you are." "I don't care what it makes me," Kaylin said quietly. "I care about ending this." Lyra stood slowly, her heart pounding. "And what happens after?" You kill Julian and then what? Spend the rest of your life running from murder charges? If that's what it takes, no. Lyra's voice cut through the room with unexpected force. I didn't survive the last 5 weeks just to watch you throw your life away on revenge. Kalen turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was something Lyra had never seen before. Not anger, not determination. Something closer to desperation. He killed my father, Kalen said, his voice breaking slightly. He murdered Marcus. He terrorized you. He destroyed everything I've spent years building, and now he's going to walk away and do it all over again to someone else. So we stop him legally. There is no legal solution here, Lyra. The system failed. The judge who signed that bail agreement is probably in Julian's pocket. Even if we expose the corruption, it'll take years. Years Julian will spend rebuilding his operation and coming after us again. Then we disappear, Lyra said. We take what's left of your resources and we start over somewhere Julian can't find us. That's not who I am. Then become someone else. Lyra crossed the room and grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You told me once that people in your world don't get happy endings, that survival is the best we can hope for. So let's survive, Kalen. Let's get out while we still can. For a moment, she thought she'd gotten through to him, thought she'd found the human being buried beneath years of violence and control. Then Kalen's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, and Lyra watched the color drain from his face. What is it? She asked. Kalen showed her the screen. A video message, no sender, just a timestamp from 10 minutes ago. He pressed play. The footage showed Elena, real time. She was in what looked like a parking garage, walking toward her car with groceries in her arms, completely unaware she was being filmed. Then a figure appeared behind her, Julian. He moved with predatory grace, closing the distance in seconds. His hand clamped over Elena's mouth before she could scream. The groceries scattered across the pavement, and then the video cut to black. Text appeared on the screen. Still think running is an option? See you in Taipei, brother. Come alone or she dies. You have 12 hours. Lyra felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. He has Elena, she whispered. Kalen's expression had gone completely blank. The mask he wore so well sliding back into place, burying whatever he was feeling beneath cold calculation. Sophia, he said quietly, I need everything you have on the Taipei compound. Blueprints, security details, entry points, everything. Kalen, this is insane. Everything! The word came out like a roar, raw and broken. Sophia flinched, then nodded and opened her laptop. Lyra grabbed Kalen's arm again. You can't do this. It's exactly what he wants, for you to walk into another trap. I know. Then don't go. I have to. Kalen's voice was hollow. Elena's in this mess because of me. She's been with my family for 15 years. She's innocent, Lyra, and if I don't go, Julian will kill her just to prove he can. And if you do go, he'll kill you both. Probably. The casual acceptance of death made Lyra want to scream. There has to be another way, she said desperately. Kalen cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The only other way is letting Julian win, letting him keep taking people I care about until there's nothing left. And I can't do that. Not anymore. Then let me come with you. Absolutely not. You don't get to make that decision for me, Lyra said fiercely. I'm your wife, Kalen. In name, in law, and now... She paused, realizing the truth as she spoke it. And now in every way that matters. So if you're walking into hell, I'm walking in beside you. Something cracked in Kalen's expression, the mask slipping enough for Lyra to see the fear beneath. I can't lose you, he whispered. Then don't lose me. Let me help you. For a long moment, Kalen said nothing. Then he pressed his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. 10 hours later, they stood outside a compound in the mountains outside Taipei, watching the sun set over terrain that looked more like a fortress than a home. The flight had been tense and silent. Sophia had stayed behind to coordinate with the few allies they still had, feeding them intelligence and monitoring Julian's movements through hacked security feeds. The compound was exactly as described. High walls, security cameras, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Getting inside would be nearly impossible, which was probably why Julian had chosen it. Last chance to turn back, Kalen said quietly. Lyra checked the weapon he'd given her, the same one she'd learned to shoot with 5 days ago, which felt like a lifetime. "I'm not turning back," she said. Kaylin's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing once before letting go. They'd spent the last 10 hours planning. Sophia had found weak points in the security system. Kaylin had called in favors from contacts who owed him their lives. And Lyra had accepted that whatever happened in the next few hours would define the rest of her existence, if she survived. "Remember the plan," Kaylin said. "We get Elena and we get out. No heroics, no confrontations we don't need." And if Julian forces a confrontation, Kaylin's expression was grim. "Then we end this, one way or another." They moved through the darkness toward the compound's east wall, where Sophia had identified a blind spot in the camera coverage. Kaylin scaled the wall first, then reached down to pull Lyra up after him. They dropped into the compound grounds, landing in shadows cast by expensive landscaping. The main building loomed ahead, modern architecture, all glass and steel, designed to project wealth and power. Kaylin led them toward a service entrance Sophia had marked on their map. The door was locked, but Kaylin made quick work of it with tools he'd brought. Inside, the compound was even more opulent than the exterior suggested. Marble floors, modern art on the walls, everything designed to impress, everything designed to hide the monster who lived here. They moved through corridors with the silence of people who understood that sound meant death. Every corner could hide an enemy, every door could open onto an ambush. Kaylin's phone buzzed softly, a message from Sophia. "Elena's on the second floor, west wing, 4 guards between you and her." Kaylin showed Lyra the message, and they adjusted course. The stairs were open and exposed, no way to climb them without being visible. But they had no choice. They ascended slowly, weapons raised, every sense on high alert. The second-floor hallway was empty, too empty. "This feels wrong," Lyra whispered. "Everything about this feels wrong," Kaylin agreed. "But we're committed now." They found the room Sophia had indicated, a heavy door with an electronic lock. Kaylin pulled out the bypass device Sophia had given them and connected it. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was Elena, bound to a chair in the center of an otherwise empty room. Her eyes widened when she saw them, tears streaming down her face. Kaylin crossed the room and cut through the ropes binding her. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded, too traumatized to speak. Lyra moved to support her, and they turned toward the door, and found Julian standing in the doorway, flanked by 8 armed guards. He smiled. "Hello, brother," Julian said, "right on time." Kaylin raised his weapon, aiming directly at Julian's chest. "Let us leave." "Now why would I do that? I went through so much trouble to get you here. You have me. That's what you wanted. Let them go." Julian's smile widened. "See, that's where you're wrong. I don't just want you, Kaylin. I want you broken. I want you to feel what I felt. The loss, the betrayal, the crushing weight of having everything taken away." "Then take it," Kaylin said quietly. "Kill me and let them walk." "No," Lyra said immediately. Julian's eyes shifted to her, and the smile on his face turned predatory. "The bookstore girl. You've been quite the surprise, Lyra. Most of Kaylin's wives crumbled under pressure, but you adapted, learned to survive, even learned to kill." The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. "I've been watching you since that first night in the cabin," Julian continued, "watching you transform from invisible nobody into something almost dangerous. It's been fascinating." "Shut up," Kaylin said. "Does she know what you've done, brother? The bodies you've buried? The deals you've made? The corruption that built your empire?" "I know enough," Lyra said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I know he's worth 10 of you." Julian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Is that what you tell yourself? That he's somehow better than me? We're the same, Lyra. We were raised by the same monster, taught the same lessons. The only difference is that I'm honest about what I am." "The difference," Kaylin said coldly, "is that I never killed my own father." The smile vanished from Julian's face. "He wasn't going to give me what I deserved," Julian said, his voice dropping to something venomous. "Everything was always about you. The golden son who could do no wrong. Even when you tried to distance yourself from the family business, even when you talked about going legitimate, father still chose you over me." So you killed him. I freed us both, Julian corrected. You just refused to see it. Kaylin's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance, Julian. Let them go. Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of 8 witnesses with weapons trained on you? If I have to. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then Elena moved. It happened so fast that Lyra almost missed it. Elena twisted out of Lyra's grip, her hand reaching for something hidden at her ankle. A gun. She raised it toward Kaylin, her face contorted with rage and betrayal. You let him die, Elena sobbed. You let Marcus die, and you did nothing. The gunshot was deafening. But it wasn't Elena who'd fired, it was Lyra. Elena's body dropped, the weapon clattering across the floor. Silence. Lyra stared at the gun in her hands, at Elena's body, at the blood spreading across expensive marble. She'd killed again. To save Kaylin. Well, Julian said quietly, that's unexpected. Kaylin's expression had gone completely blank, shock and grief and something else Lyra couldn't name warring across his face. Elena was working for you, Lyra whispered, the realization hitting her like ice water. This whole time. Not the whole time, Julian said, but long enough. Marcus's death broke something in her. Made her realize that loyalty to the Vey family only leads to graves. So she came to me, gave me information, helped me stay one step ahead. That's why you always knew where we were, Kaylin said hollowly. Elena was reporting our movements, among others. But yes, she was particularly useful. Lyra felt sick. The woman who'd given her advice in the kitchen that first morning, who'd been kind when kindness felt impossible, who'd suffered alongside them. All of it had been a lie. Now, Julian said, his voice hardening, drop your weapons, or my men open fire. If they fire, you die too, Kaylin said. I'm aware. But unlike you, brother, I'm not afraid to die. Are you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kaylin's eyes met Lyra's across the room. In that moment, a lifetime of unspoken words passed between them. Then Kaylin smiled. Not his cold, controlled smile, but something genuine and devastating. Not anymore, he said, and pulled the trigger. Everything exploded into chaos. Julian dove behind cover as Kaylin's bullet grazed his shoulder. The guards opened fire. Kaylin grabbed Lyra and pulled her down as bullets tore through the air where she'd been standing. They returned fire from behind overturned furniture, the room transforming into a war zone. 3 guards dropped in the first exchange, 2 more in the second. But there were too many, and Kaylin and Lyra were pinned down with nowhere to run. The window! Kaylin shouted over the gunfire. Lyra looked. The window was 10 feet away. Beyond it, a drop that would probably kill them. But staying here would definitely kill them. On 3, Kaylin said. 1, more gunfire. Lyra returned it blindly, her hand shaking but her aim true enough. 2. Kaylin stood, firing 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 guards fell. 3! They ran. Bullets chased them across the room. Lyra felt one tear through her sleeve, burning her arm but missing flesh. They hit the window at full speed. Glass exploded around them. And then they were falling. The drop was shorter than Lyra expected, maybe 15 feet to a sloped roof below. They hit hard, rolling to absorb the impact, then sliding down the tile surface. Lyra's fingers scrabbled for purchase, finding none. She went over the edge, and Kaylin's hand caught her wrist. For a moment, they hung suspended. Kaylin on the roof, barely holding on himself. Lyra dangling above a 2-story drop to a concrete below. I've got you, son, Kaylin gasped. You can't hold both of us. I've got you! He pulled. Lyra's free hand found the edge of the roof and she hauled herself up, muscles screaming. They collapsed together on the tiles, breathing hard, alive against all odds. We need to move, Kaylin said. They slid down to another roof, then another, descending the compound's architecture like a ladder. Behind them, shouts echoed. Flashlights swept the grounds. They dropped to the ground near the east wall and ran. Behind them, gunfire erupted again, but they were moving too fast, too desperately. They scaled the wall and dropped to the other side, landing in brush that tore at their clothes. They ran through the darkness, through terrain they didn't know, until the compound was far behind them and their lungs burned too much to continue. They collapsed in a clearing, gasping for air, covered in cuts and blood and cordite residue. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lyra started laughing. It was insane, inappropriate, but she couldn't stop. "We're alive," she gasped between laughs that might have been sobs. "We're actually alive." Kaylin looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Then he started laughing too, a sound Lyra had never heard from him before. Raw, genuine, human. They laughed until the hysteria faded, leaving only exhaustion and the crushing weight of everything they'd survived. "Elena," Kaylin said finally, the laughter dying, "I should have seen it, should have known." "You couldn't have known," Lyra said quietly. "She fooled everyone. I let Marcus die trusting the wrong people. You did everything you could." Kaylin shook his head. It wasn't enough. Lyra reached for his hand in the darkness, lacing their fingers together. "It was enough to keep us alive. It was enough to stop Julian. It has to be enough, Kaylin, because it's all we have." They sat in silence, listening to the night sounds around them. Finally, Kaylin pulled out his phone. Miraculously, it had survived the fall. He called Sophia. "We're out," he said when she answered. "Julian's alive but wounded. The compound's compromised. We need extraction." Lyra couldn't hear Sophia's response, but she watched relief flood Kaylin's face. "Okay," he said. "Okay, thank you." He hung up and looked at Lyra. "She's sending a car. 40 minutes. And then?" "And then we disappear. New identities, new lives. Somewhere Julian can never find us." The word should have brought relief. Instead, Lyra felt only loss for everything they were leaving behind. "What about your father's empire?" she asked. "Everything he built?" "Let it burn," Kaylin said quietly. "I'm done sacrificing everything for an empire built on blood. I'm done being the man my father raised me to be." "Then who are you?" Kaylin looked at her, and in the moonlight filtering through the trees, Lyra saw something she'd never seen before. Hope. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'd like to find out. If you'll help me." Lyra squeezed his hand. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can just exist without looking over our shoulders every second." "That sounds impossible." "Probably," Kaylin agreed. "But after everything we've survived, impossible doesn't scare me anymore." They sat together in the darkness, waiting for rescue, holding on to each other like anchors in a storm. And for the first time since that cold wedding 5 weeks ago, Lyra felt something that might have been peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But the possibility of it. The beginning of something that might, with time and distance and healing, become a life worth living. Bus. 6 months later, in a small coastal town whose name didn't matter, Lyra stood on a beach watching the sun set over water that stretched to infinity. Behind her, a modest house sat tucked into the dunes. Nothing like the Vey estate, but theirs in a way that mansion never had been. She heard footsteps behind her, felt Kaylin's presence before his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. They'd both changed in the months since Taipei. Kaylin had let go of the cold control that had defined him for so long, allowing himself to be human in ways Lyra suspected he'd never permitted before. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, slept without nightmares some nights. And Lyra had discovered that the strength she'd found in survival didn't disappear when the danger passed. She was building something new, a life that belonged to her, not defined by trauma or fear or someone else's expectations. They'd heard nothing from Julian in 6 months. Sophia's last report said he'd disappeared completely, either dead from his injuries or fled so deep underground that even her considerable resources couldn't find him. Lyra chose to believe he was gone, because the alternative, living every day waiting for revenge that might never come, was no way to live at all. "What are you thinking about?" Kaylin asked quietly. "How different everything is from that day in the cathedral." "Regrets?" Lyra turned in his arms to face him. "No, not anymore." "You?" Kaylin was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "I regret that you had to go through any of it, that you had to see that darkness, become part of it." "I don't," Lyra said firmly. "Because if I hadn't, I'd still be invisible, still be disappearing, and now..." She gestured to the beach, the sunset, the life they were building. Now I'm more real than I've ever been. Kaylin's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I love you. It was the first time he'd said it, the first time either of them had. I know, Lyra whispered. I've known for a while. And? She smiled, genuine and warm and full of something that felt like coming home. And I love you too, even though you're impossible and dangerous and brought more chaos into my life than any person should survive. That's fair. They stood together on the beach as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that looked like hope set on fire. Behind them, the house waited, a sanctuary built from ruins, a second chance carved from survival. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like possibility. Two people once haunted by isolation had found something neither expected in arranged marriage and violence and chaos. They'd found each other, not through soft romance or gentle courtship, but through fire and blood and the brutal truth that some love stories are forged in hell and emerge stronger for it. The woman who'd stood at the altar 5 weeks ago, quiet, resigned, invisible, was gone forever. In her place stood someone who'd walked through darkness and discovered she carried her own light. And the man who'd married her out of obligation had become something he'd never imagined possible. Someone capable of choosing love over power. Someone willing to burn down an empire to protect one person. Someone, finally, who understood that strength wasn't control. It was surrender. The waves crashed against the shore in endless rhythm, and somewhere in the distance the world continued turning, full of danger and chaos and violence they'd left behind. But here, in this moment, on this beach, they were simply two people who'd survived the impossible. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Okant. The Wei dynasty crumbled within a year. Without Kaelin to hold it together, and with Julian's corruption exposed, the empire his father had built collapsed into infighting and federal investigations. Sophia disappeared into legitimate law practice, using her considerable skills to help people escape situations like the one Lyra had survived. Julian's body was never found. Some said he died from his wounds in a Taipei hospital. Others claimed he fled to South America, still plotting revenge that would never come. The truth remained buried in classified files and conspiracy theories. But Kaelin and Lyra never looked back. They built something new from the ashes of their old lives. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs in a way that mattered more than any empire or dynasty ever could. Some love stories are written in candlelight and roses. Theirs was written in blood and fire and the brutal grace of survival. And in the end, that made it more real than any fairy tale could ever be.